Dr. Sarah Chin pressed her ear against the cold concrete wall of the abandoned research facility, straining to hear any sound that might indicate whether the corridor beyond was clear. The emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows across her face as she clutched a modified radio transmitter in her trembling hands. 3 months had passed since the outbreak began, and she was one of the few survivors who understood the true nature of the infection that had transformed nearly 90% of humanity into flesh-hungry creatures. The facility's underground levels had become her sanctuary, but supplies were running dangerously low, and she knew that staying hidden was no longer an option. The radio crackled to life, and Sarah's heart leaped as she heard the first human voice in weeks. "This is Commander Marcus Webb broadcasting from the Phoenix Safe Zone. Any survivors within a 50-mile radius, respond immediately. We have established a secure perimeter and are organizing evacuation runs for the next 48 hours only." Sarah's hands shook as she adjusted the frequency, desperately trying to strengthen the signal. The Phoenix Safe Zone was legendary among survivors, a fortified military base that had successfully held off multiple zombie hordes while maintaining communication with other survivor settlements across the continent. As she prepared to respond, a low moan echoed through the ventilation system above her head. Sarah froze, her blood turning to ice as she realized the sound was coming from directly overhead. The zombies had found a way into the facility's air ducts. She had perhaps minutes before they would break through the ceiling panels and flood the room. With no time to waste, she grabbed her emergency backpack and activated the radio one final time. "Phoenix Safe Zone, this is Dr. Sarah Chin at the Blackwood Research Facility. I have critical information about the infection's origin and a potential cure. My location is compromised. I'm heading to extraction point Delta 7. The response came immediately, filled with static but unmistakably urgent. "Dr. Chen, this is Commander Webb. We've been searching for you for months. Intelligence suggests you were working on Project Lazarus before the outbreak. Is this correct?" Sarah's mind raced as she remembered the classified research that had gone so terribly wrong. Project Lazarus had been designed to create a serum that could regenerate human tissue and effectively grant immortality, but the experimental compound had instead created something far more sinister. The test subjects had died and returned as aggressive, nearly indestructible creatures with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. "Affirmative, Commander. I have samples of the original serum and detailed research notes. The infection can be stopped, but we need to reach the primary laboratory at the Meridian Corporation headquarters. The antidote components are stored there in a biosecure vault." The ceiling panels began to buckle as more zombies gathered in the ductwork above. Sarah could hear their claws scraping against metal and their hungry growls growing louder. She knew she had to move now or risk being trapped forever in the facility that had once been her life's work. Commander Webb's voice crackled through the radio with renewed urgency. "Dr. Chin, we're dispatching a rescue team to your location, but they won't arrive for at least 6 hours. The area is crawling with infected, and our vehicles can't navigate the debris-filled streets after dark. Can you hold your position until dawn?" Sarah looked around the room at her limited supplies. A few protein bars, 2 water bottles, a flashlight with dying batteries, and a small pistol with only 8 rounds remaining. The zombies above were becoming more aggressive, and she could see dust falling from the ceiling as they pressed against the weakening panels. "Negative, Commander. My position is compromised. I'm going to attempt to reach the surface and find alternative shelter. I'll try to make contact again in 12 hours from a new location." She switched off the radio and stuffed it into her backpack along with the precious research samples that might represent humanity's last hope. The facility's emergency systems suddenly failed, plunging the corridor into complete darkness except for the faint glow of her flashlight. In the distance, she could hear the unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps, slow, dragging, and accompanied by the wet, rattling breath of the undead. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, knowing that her journey to the surface would be the most dangerous few minutes of her life. The zombies had excellent hearing and could detect the slightest movement, but she had spent months studying their behavior patterns and knew that they were slower and less coordinated in complete darkness. As she began to move through the facility's maze-like corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that the infected creatures were not just hunting randomly, they seemed to be following a pattern, as if something was coordinating their movements and drawing them toward her location with deliberate intent. Commander Marcus Webb stood before the tactical display in the Phoenix Safe Zone's command center, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering screens that showed zombie movement patterns across the city. The urgency in Dr. Chen's transmission had sent shockwaves through the military leadership, but Webb knew that mounting a rescue operation in the heart of the infected zone would be nothing short of suicide for most teams. He needed his absolute best soldiers for this mission, people who had proven themselves capable of surviving the impossible odds that the zombie apocalypse had thrown at humanity. "Jake, I need you to gear up for immediate deployment," Webb called to his lead sniper, Jake Morrison, who was cleaning his custom rifle near the armory. Morrison looked up with his characteristic calm expression, the kind of steady demeanor that had kept him alive through countless encounters with the undead. At 32, he had been a military marksman before the outbreak, but the past 3 months had transformed him into something far more deadly, a hunter who could drop zombies from distances that seemed impossible, even when they moved in coordinated groups. Lisa Torres, the team's medic, was already checking her medical supplies when Webb approached her station. She had been a trauma surgeon before the world ended, and her steady hands had saved more lives in the past few months than she had in her entire previous career. "Commander, if Dr. Chin really has information about a cure, we can't afford to lose her," Torres said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had watched too many people die from injuries that should have been treatable. "But I have to ask, what makes you think we can reach her when 3 previous rescue teams have gone dark in that sector?" Webb's expression darkened as he remembered the failed missions that had cost him good soldiers. "Because this time we're not going in blind. Tommy's been developing new tactics specifically for the evolved infected we've been encountering." He gestured toward Tommy Rodriguez, the team's demolitions expert, who was hunched over a workbench surrounded by modified explosives and electronic devices. Rodriguez had discovered that the newer zombies were learning to avoid traditional explosive patterns, forcing him to create increasingly sophisticated traps and diversion tactics. "The infected aren't just wandering around randomly anymore," Rodriguez explained, looking up from his work with concern etched across his face. "They're coordinating, setting up ambush points, and some of them seem to be remembering human tactics. Yesterday's patrol reported seeing zombies using tools, actual tools, to break through our outer defenses. We're not just fighting mindless monsters anymore, we're fighting something that's learning to think." Webb nodded grimly, having suspected as much from the recent intelligence reports. "That's why we're going in with full tactical support and a new approach. We'll use the underground maintenance tunnels to get within 2 blocks of the research facility, then create multiple diversions to split their attention. Lisa, you'll stay with our escape route and provide covering fire. Jake, you'll take overwatch positions and thin their numbers before we make our move. Tommy, you'll handle any obstacles and create exit strategies if things go wrong." The team spent the next hour reviewing satellite imagery and survivor reports, mapping out the most dangerous areas where zombie concentrations were highest. The Blackwood Research Facility was located in what had once been the city's business district, but the area had become a death trap filled with infected creatures that seemed to be drawn to the location for reasons no one fully understood. Several survivors had reported seeing zombies gathering in large numbers around the facility, almost as if they were guarding something important. As the team prepared to depart, Webb received another transmission from Dr. Chin, her voice crackling through heavy static. "Phoenix Safe Zone, this is Dr. Chin. I've reached the surface level, but the situation is worse than I expected. The infected are exhibiting coordinated behavior patterns, and they seem to be actively searching for me. I'm seeing evidence of tool use and problem-solving abilities that shouldn't be possible. Something is directing their actions, and I think it might be connected to the advanced stages of the infection." Webb exchanged worried glances with his team as they absorbed this information. If Dr. Chin was right, they weren't just dealing with evolved zombies, they were potentially facing an entirely new form of intelligent undead that could adapt and strategize. "Dr. Chin, we're en route to your location. Estimate arrival in 4 hours. Can you maintain your position until then?" "Negative, Commander. I'm going to attempt to reach the old subway station 3 blocks north of the facility. The infected seem to avoid that area for some reason. I'll try to hold position there until you arrive." The transmission cut out, leaving the team in tense silence as they realized their mission had just become exponentially more dangerous. Webb looked at his soldiers, knowing that each of them understood the stakes. "Gentlemen, lady, we're not just rescuing one person today. We're potentially saving the entire human race. Let's move out and bring our scientist home." Dr. Sarah Chin stumbled through the darkness of the abandoned subway tunnels, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive blackness as she followed the rusted railway tracks deeper underground. The air was thick with the smell of decay and stagnant water, but it was mercifully free of the rotting stench that accompanied the infected. She had been moving through the tunnel system for nearly 2 hours, using her knowledge of the city's infrastructure to navigate toward the rendezvous point, when she heard the unmistakable sound of human voices echoing from somewhere ahead. Her heart raced with a mixture of hope and caution as she approached the source of the sounds. After months of isolation, the prospect of encountering other survivors was both thrilling and terrifying. She had learned the hard way that not all humans in this new world could be trusted, and desperation had driven some people to commit acts that would have been unthinkable before the outbreak. As she rounded a corner in the tunnel, her flashlight illuminated a makeshift barricade constructed from shopping carts, metal sheets, and concrete blocks. "Stop right there and identify yourself," commanded a firm female voice from behind the barrier. Sarah raised her hands slowly, keeping her flashlight pointed toward the ground to avoid blinding whoever was speaking. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chin. I'm trying to reach the Phoenix Safe Zone, and I have information that could help stop the infection." A figure emerged from the shadows, a middle-aged Hispanic woman with calloused hands and intelligent eyes that seemed to assess every detail of Sarah's appearance and demeanor. "I'm Elena Vasquez," the woman said, lowering a crossbow that had been trained on Sarah's chest. "I used to maintain these tunnels before the world went to hell. Now I keep a group of survivors alive down here." Elena gestured for Sarah to follow her through a gap in the barricade, leading her into a surprisingly well-organized underground community. The tunnel had been transformed into a living space with sleeping areas, a medical station, and even a small workshop where survivors were crafting weapons and tools from salvaged materials. Sarah was amazed to discover that nearly 40 people had made their home in the underground network, including families with children who played quietly in designated safe areas. Elena explained that the group had developed sophisticated systems for avoiding detection, including a network of lookouts who monitored zombie movements on the surface and an intricate warning system that could alert the entire community to potential threats within minutes. "The infected rarely come down here," Elena explained, "but when they do, we've learned to disappear deeper into the system." "You said you have information about stopping the infection," said a tall man with graying hair who introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Reed, a former biology professor who had become the group's unofficial leader alongside Elena. "What exactly are you talking about?" Sarah carefully removed the sealed research samples from her backpack, explaining her work on Project Lazarus and the potential for developing an antidote. The survivors gathered around as she described the facility at Meridian Corporation where the necessary components were stored. However, not everyone in the group was convinced that finding a cure was the right approach. "You're talking about risking lives to save people who might already be beyond saving," argued a younger man named David, whose aggressive stance and suspicious glances made Sarah uncomfortable. "What if we used your research to make the infection work for us instead? We could create weapons, make ourselves immune while turning our enemies into zombies." The suggestion sparked a heated debate that revealed deep divisions within the survivor community. Some believed that developing weapons was the only way to reclaim the surface world, while others insisted that preserving humanity's moral foundation was more important than winning through any means necessary. Elena tried to maintain order, but Sarah could see that the group's unity was fragile and that her arrival had inadvertently triggered a crisis of leadership. The argument was interrupted by the sound of the warning system, a series of metallic taps echoing through the tunnel system. "They're coming," Elena whispered, her face pale with fear. "The infected have found a way in." The survivors moved with practiced efficiency, gathering weapons and taking defensive positions as the sounds of approaching zombies grew louder. Sarah realized that the infected had somehow tracked her into the tunnels, putting the entire underground community at risk. As the first zombies appeared at the edge of the flashlight beams, Elena made a decision that would change everything. "David, take half the group and seal the eastern passages. Dr. Reed, get the children to the deep shelter. Dr. Chin, stay with me. We need to reach the surface communication equipment and contact your rescue team." The battle for the underground sanctuary had begun, and Sarah knew that the survival of both the hidden community and potentially all of humanity now depended on their ability to work together against an enemy that was growing more intelligent and dangerous with each passing hour. Commander Webb's rescue team moved through the abandoned office building with tactical precision, their boots crunching on broken glass and debris as they approached the underground survivor network's emergency signal location. The sound of gunfire and screams had guided them to the subway entrance, where they discovered Elena Vasquez and her group fighting desperately against a coordinated zombie assault. Jake Morrison's sniper rifle cracked repeatedly from his elevated position, dropping infected creatures with surgical accuracy, while Tommy Rodriguez used controlled explosions to collapse tunnel sections and create choke points. "Dr. Chin, thank God you're alive," Webb shouted over the chaos as he and Lisa Torres provided covering fire for the retreating survivors. The underground community had suffered casualties, but Elena's leadership and the timely arrival of the rescue team had prevented a complete massacre. As they regrouped in a secure section of the tunnel system, Dr. Chin noticed something disturbing about the zombies they had just fought. Many of them wore the distinctive uniforms of Meridian Corporation security personnel, and their attack patterns had been far too organized for typical infected behavior. "Commander, we need to reach the Meridian building immediately," Dr. Chin said, her voice urgent as she examined one of the dead security guards. "These aren't random zombies. They're employees from the corporation, and they were specifically hunting for me." She pulled a small device from the guard's belt, a tracking beacon that had been modified with biotechnology she recognized from her own research. "Someone is using the infected as hunting dogs and they know exactly where I am." Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her face grim with determination. "My people have been watching the Meridian building for weeks. It's not just occupied by zombies, there are living people in there, people with military equipment and resources. They've been capturing survivors and taking them inside." Dr. Reed nodded in agreement, adding that several of their scouting parties had reported seeing helicopters landing on the building's roof and heavily armed personnel moving through the structure. Webb felt his blood run cold as the implications became clear. "You're telling me that Meridian Corporation is still operational? That they're actively using the infected as weapons?" Dr. Chin nodded, explaining that her research had been part of a much larger program designed to create biological weapons for military applications. Project Lazarus was just one component of their bioweapons development. They were creating different strains of the infection for different purposes, some for crowd control, others for targeted assassination. The group made their way through the tunnel system toward the Meridian building, with Elena guiding them through passages that would bring them close to the corporate headquarters without being detected on the surface. As they moved, Dr. Chin revealed more disturbing details about her former employer. The outbreak wasn't an accident. It was a field test that went beyond their control parameters. They were testing the infection spread rate and lethality in a controlled urban environment, but something went wrong with the containment protocols. Tommy Rodriguez paused his equipment check to look at Dr. Chin with horror. "Are you saying that millions of people died because of a corporate weapons test?" The weight of the revelation settled over the group as they realized they weren't just fighting zombies, they were fighting a conspiracy that had deliberately unleashed hell on Earth. "There are other facilities around the world," Dr. Chin continued, "research sites in Europe, Asia, and South America where similar experiments were conducted. If we don't stop them here, they'll continue their research and potentially create even more dangerous strains." As they approached the building's lower levels, they encountered their first Meridian security team, living soldiers wearing advanced protective gear and carrying weapons designed specifically for zombie elimination. The firefight was brief but intense, with Jake Morrison's sniper skills proving decisive against the corporate mercenaries. Lisa Torres examined the fallen soldiers' equipment and discovered communication devices that revealed the scope of the conspiracy. "They're not just covering up the outbreak," Torres reported, her voice shaking with anger. "They're actively working to capture immune survivors and use them for continued research. Dr. Chin, you're not just wanted for your knowledge, you're wanted as a test subject." The revelation that the corporation was continuing its human experiments added a new layer of urgency to their mission, as they realized that reaching the antidote components was only part of the challenge. Elena made a decision that surprised everyone. "My people will create a diversion at the building's main entrance. We've lost too many friends to these corporate monsters and it's time to make them pay." Webb tried to object, knowing that the survivors lacked the military training necessary for such a dangerous operation, but Elena was determined. "This is our fight too, Commander. These people destroyed our world and we're going to help you stop them." As they prepared to infiltrate the Meridian Corporation headquarters, Webb realized that they were no longer just on a rescue mission. They were about to wage war against the very people responsible for humanity's near extinction, and the fate of the entire world hung in the balance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the devastated city center as Commander Webb's team and Elena's survivors approached the towering Meridian Corporation headquarters. The building's sleek glass facade reflected the destruction around it, standing like a monument to corporate power amid the ruins of civilization. What they couldn't see from their position was the massive network of tunnels, basements, and underground parking garages that honeycombed the area beneath the business district. Spaces that had become home to the largest concentration of infected creatures anyone had ever encountered. Dr. Chin checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that the research samples were secure in her reinforced backpack. The weight of humanity's potential salvation felt heavier with each step toward the building, but she knew that the antidote components stored in the biosecure vault were their only hope of ending the nightmare that her research had helped create. The vault is on the 32nd floor, she explained to the team, but we'll need to access the building's central computer system to override the security protocols. Elena's survivors had positioned themselves at strategic points around the building's perimeter, ready to create diversions that would draw attention away from the main infiltration team. The plan was complex but necessary. They would need to move quickly through the building while avoiding both the corporate security forces and whatever infected creatures might be lurking in the structure. Tommy Rodriguez had rigged several explosive charges to seal potential escape routes for any enemies, while Jake Morrison had identified sniper positions that would give him clear sight lines of the building's entrances. As they approached the main entrance, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate with a low, rhythmic rumbling. Webb held up his hand, signaling for the team to stop as he tried to identify the source of the disturbance. The vibrations grew stronger, and then they heard it, a sound like distant thunder that seemed to be coming from directly below them. "That's not construction equipment," Lisa Torres whispered, her medical training helping her recognize the organic nature of the sound. The first cracks appeared in the street directly in front of the Meridian building, spider-webbing outward as something massive moved beneath the asphalt. Then, with a deafening crash, the pavement exploded upward as hundreds of zombies burst from the underground spaces like a grotesque eruption of death. The infected creatures had been dormant in the darkness, but the team's approach had somehow triggered a mass awakening that sent thousands of zombies streaming toward the surface. "Fall back to position Alpha," Webb shouted over the chaos as the horde emerged from manholes, storm drains, and collapsed sections of sidewalk. These weren't the slow, shambling zombies they had encountered before. These creatures moved with purpose and coordination, their eyes focused with an intelligence that sent chills down the spines of even the most experienced survivors. Jake Morrison's rifle began its deadly work, each shot dropping a zombie with mechanical precision, but for every creature that fell, 3 more took its place. Elena's voice crackled through the radio as her people engaged zombies emerging from other locations around the building. "Commander, we're seeing the same thing on all sides. It's like they were waiting for us." The survivors fought with desperate courage, using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics to slow the advancing horde, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming. Tommy Rodriguez detonated his charges in sequence, creating temporary barriers of rubble and flame, but the zombies simply climbed over the obstacles or found new routes to continue their assault. Dr. Chin noticed something that made her blood run cold. Some of the zombies were wearing the same tracking devices she had seen on the security guards in the tunnels. "They're being controlled," she shouted to Webb as she dodged the grasping hands of a zombie that had once been a businessman. "Someone is directing them, using them as a defense system for the building." The realization that they were facing not just a zombie horde but a coordinated military operation changed everything about their tactical situation. Lisa Torres was forced to use her medical supplies to treat wounded survivors while simultaneously fighting off infected attackers. "We can't maintain this position much longer," she called out, her hands working frantically to bandage a deep gash on one of Elena's people. "We need to either retreat or find another way into the building." The sound of helicopters approaching from the distance added another layer of complexity to their situation, as it became clear that the corporate security forces were preparing to intervene. Webb made a command decision that would define the rest of their mission. "Elena, take your people and continue the perimeter assault. We're going to fight our way through the main entrance while they're distracted by the horde. Tommy, I need you to create us a path through that mass of infected." As explosions rocked the area and gunfire echoed off the building's walls, the team prepared to charge directly into the heart of the zombie swarm, knowing that their next few minutes would determine whether humanity had any future at all. The interior of the Meridian Corporation headquarters was a nightmare of corporate sterility twisted into something horrific. Emergency lighting cast sickly red shadows across marble floors stained with dried blood, while the building's ventilation system carried the sounds of inhuman screams from floors both above and below. Commander Webb's team had fought their way through the lobby, leaving behind a trail of destroyed zombies and shattered glass. But Dr. Chin knew that the real horrors were waiting for them in the upper levels where the experimental laboratories were located. "The elevator systems are still functional," Dr. Chin observed, studying the building's directory with growing unease. "But that means they're being maintained by someone who's still alive in this building." The implications were clear. They weren't just dealing with abandoned research facilities, but with an active operation that was continuing the experiments even after the outbreak. Lisa Torres checked her medical supplies nervously, knowing that the enhanced zombies they were about to encounter would be far more dangerous than anything they had faced on the streets. As they ascended through the building's floors, they encountered the first of the experimental subjects on the 15th level. These weren't the shambling creatures they had grown accustomed to fighting. These zombies moved with fluid grace, their enhanced musculature allowing them to leap impossible distances and strike with devastating force. Jake Morrison's sniper rifle was less effective in the confined spaces, forcing him to switch to a modified assault rifle that could deliver rapid-fire rounds capable of stopping the enhanced creatures. Jesus Christ, what did they do to these people? Tommy Rodriguez whispered as they examined the remains of a zombie that had been genetically modified to have elongated limbs and razor-sharp bone protrusions. Dr. Chen's face was pale with horror as she recognized the experimental procedures that had been used to create these abominations. They were trying to create the perfect biological weapon, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Each floor contains different experimental subjects designed for specific military applications. The 20th floor housed zombies that had been modified for enhanced sensory perception, creatures that could track their prey through sound, smell, and even electromagnetic signatures from electronic devices. The team was forced to move in complete silence, using hand signals and pre-planned routes to avoid detection. When they were finally discovered, the resulting battle was unlike anything they had experienced, with zombies that seemed to anticipate their movements and respond to their tactics with frightening intelligence. Webb realized they were facing something unprecedented when one of the enhanced zombies picked up a fallen security guard's weapon and began using it with deadly accuracy. "They're not just retaining memories," he reported over the radio to Elena's team, who were still fighting the horde outside. "They're learning new skills in real time." The discovery that some experimental subjects could adapt and evolve during combat changed every assumption they had made about the infection's limitations. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as they approached the 25th floor, where she knew the most advanced experiments had been conducted. "There's something I haven't told you about my research," she admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. "I didn't just work on the serum that created the basic infection. I also helped develop the enhancement protocols that created these modified zombies. I thought we were trying to cure diseases and extend human life, but they were using my work to create weapons." The confession sent shockwaves through the team, but Webb maintained his focus on the mission. "Dr. Chen, right now we need to get to that vault and stop this madness. We can deal with the moral implications later." The 25th floor was a maze of laboratories and containment cells, many of which had been breached by their former occupants. The walls were covered with research notes and photographs that revealed the full scope of Meridian's experiments. Hundreds of test subjects had been subjected to various enhancement procedures, creating an army of specialized biological weapons. Lisa Torres discovered a series of medical files that made her stomach turn. "They weren't just experimenting on volunteers," she reported, her voice filled with disgust. "They were using kidnapped civilians, including children, as test subjects." The revelation that innocent people had been forcibly transformed into weapons added fuel to the team's determination to shut down the operation permanently. As they fought their way through the laboratory levels, they encountered Dr. Harrison Vance, the lead researcher who had been Dr. Chen's former supervisor. Vance was still alive, barricaded in a secure laboratory where he had been continuing his experiments even as the world collapsed around him. "Sarah, you've come back to finish our work," he called out through the reinforced glass, his eyes gleaming with scientific fervor. "Together, we can perfect the enhancement process and create a new form of human evolution." The confrontation with Vance would force Dr. Chen to face the full consequences of her research and make a choice that would determine not just the success of their mission, but the very future of human civilization. Dr. Harrison Vance stood behind the reinforced laboratory glass like a mad prophet of science, his laboratory coat stained with substances that Dr. Chen didn't want to identify. The secured laboratory around him was filled with active experiments. Zombies in various stages of enhancement suspended in fluid-filled chambers, their bodies twisted into forms that defied nature. "Sarah, you always lacked the vision to see what we could accomplish," Vance called out, his voice echoing through the intercom system. "These creatures aren't abominations, they're the next step in human evolution, freed from the weaknesses of emotion and moral hesitation." Commander Webb leveled his weapon at the glass, but Dr. Chin stopped him with a gesture. She knew that Vance possessed crucial information about the vault's security systems, and they would need his cooperation to access the antidote components. "Harrison, look around you," she said, her voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. "The world is dying because of our research. Millions of people are dead and you're still playing God with human lives." Vance laughed, a sound that chilled everyone in the room. "Dead? Sarah, they're more alive than they've ever been. Free from pain, free from fear, free from the petty concerns that hold humanity back. He gestured toward a control panel covered with monitoring equipment. I've been perfecting the enhancement process. The subjects on the upper floors are just the beginning. I've created zombies that can think, plan, and coordinate attacks with military precision. The revelation that the coordinated zombie attacks had been orchestrated by Vance's enhanced subjects sent a wave of anger through the team. Jake Morrison's finger tightened on his trigger, but Webb maintained discipline, knowing they needed to reach the vault before the building's security systems could be activated against them. Dr. Vance, we're here for the antidote components, Webb stated firmly. You can either help us access the vault, or we'll find another way. Tommy Rodriguez had been examining the laboratory's security systems while the others talked, and his expression was grim. Commander, he's rigged this entire floor with explosive charges. If we try to breach the laboratory by force, he'll bring down half the building. The demolitions expert had encountered sophisticated trap systems before, but Vance's setup was designed by someone who understood both military tactics and scientific precision. Dr. Chen made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Harrison, I'll stay and help you complete the research if you give my team access to the vault. The offer was met with shocked protests from Webb's team, but Chen continued speaking before they could stop her. You said you needed my expertise to perfect the enhancement process. Here's your chance. Let them retrieve the antidote components and I'll work with you to create whatever you think will save humanity. Vance's eyes gleamed with interest, but Lisa Torres stepped forward with medical authority. Dr. Chen, you can't seriously be considering working with this maniac. He's using innocent people as test subjects. The moral weight of the decision hung heavy in the air as the team realized that saving humanity might require someone to make the ultimate sacrifice by working with the enemy. The vault is on the 32nd floor, Vance said finally, his finger hovering over the explosive controls. But the security system requires 2 biometric authorizations, mine and Sarah's. If you want those antidote components, she stays here while you retrieve them. The trap was perfect in its cruel simplicity. They could save the world, but only by leaving behind the person whose knowledge was most crucial to implementing the cure. Webb understood the implications immediately. Dr. Chen, there has to be another way. We're not leaving you with this psychopath. But Chen was already moving toward the laboratory's entrance, her decision made. Commander, the antidote components are useless without someone who understands how to synthesize them. Elena's people include Dr. Reed, who has the biological knowledge necessary to create the cure. As the laboratory doors sealed behind Dr. Chen, she turned to face her former supervisor with determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Harrison, you want to create the perfect biological weapon? Then let's discuss what that actually means. Her plan was dangerous and desperate. She would use Vance's obsession against him, feeding him false information about enhancement protocols while her team retrieved the real antidote components. The sound of approaching helicopters and intensifying gunfire from the floors below indicated that the corporate security forces were making their final push to eliminate any witnesses to their experiments. Webb's team had minutes to reach the vault, retrieve the antidote components, and escape the building before it became their tomb. As they fought their way up the final floors, each team member understood that Dr. Chen's sacrifice might be the only thing standing between humanity and total extinction. In the laboratory below, Dr. Chen began the most important performance of her life, knowing that every word she spoke to Vance could determine whether the human race had any future at all. 6 months after the antidote's global distribution, the morning sun rose over the rebuilt settlement of New Phoenix, casting golden light across fields where crops grew in soil that had been cleansed of the infection's taint. Commander Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of the settlement's central command tower, watching as construction crews worked to expand the community that had grown from a few hundred survivors to nearly 10,000 people. The sight still amazed him: children playing in safe courtyards, families reuniting after months of separation, and the sound of laughter echoing where once only screams had filled the air. Dr. Marcus Reed, the former biology professor who had become the settlement's chief medical officer, approached Webb with a tablet displaying global recovery statistics. The latest reports from the European settlements are encouraging, Reed reported, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had worked tirelessly to synthesize and distribute the cure. The infection rates have dropped to less than 2% in most recovered territories, and the remaining zombies are showing signs of cognitive improvement. Webb nodded, remembering the desperate final hours in the Meridian building when everything had seemed hopeless. Jake Morrison had successfully retrieved the antidote components from the 32nd floor vault, while Tommy Rodriguez had disabled the building's explosive systems and created an escape route through the structure's weakened sections. Lisa Torres had coordinated the medical distribution networks that allowed survivor settlements worldwide to manufacture and administer the cure to their communities. The sacrifice of Dr. Sarah Chen weighed heavily on Webb's mind, even though her final transmission had confirmed the success of their mission. She had managed to deceive Dr. Vance long enough for the team to escape, then activated the building's emergency broadcast system to transmit the complete antidote formula to every functioning radio receiver on the continent. Her last words, transmitted as the building collapsed around her, had been a message of hope. Tell them that humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to survive, it's our willingness to sacrifice for each other. Elena Vasquez had become the settlement's coordinator of survivor integration, helping newly arrived families adapt to life in the growing community. Her experience leading the underground network had proven invaluable in organizing the complex logistics of feeding, housing, and protecting thousands of people. "We've received word from the Asian settlements," she reported to Webb during their daily briefing. "They've successfully established contact with 3 previously unknown survivor communities, including one with over 5,000 people." The global recovery had not been without challenges. Pockets of enhanced zombies, created by Vance's experiments, continued to pose threats in remote areas where the antidote had been difficult to distribute. Specialized hunting teams, led by veterans like Jake Morrison, worked to track down and neutralize these remaining creatures while searching for other survivors who might still be trapped in infected zones. Lisa Torres had established a comprehensive medical program that not only treated the physical effects of the infection but also provided psychological support for survivors dealing with the trauma of the apocalypse. "We're seeing remarkable progress in cognitive recovery among former zombies," she explained to a gathering of settlement leaders. "The antidote doesn't just stop the infection, it actually reverses much of the neurological damage, allowing people to reclaim their humanity." The settlement's communications center buzzed with activity as radio operators maintained contact with survivor communities across 6 continents. The network that Dr. Chen had died to establish had grown into a global system that coordinated resource sharing, medical assistance, and mutual defense against remaining threats. Tommy Rodriguez had adapted his explosive expertise to peaceful purposes, leading mining and construction operations that helped expand the settlement's infrastructure. As Webb reviewed the day's reports, he reflected on how much had changed since that desperate night when Dr. Chen's transmission had set everything in motion. The world was far from fully recovered, vast areas remained uninhabitable, and the global population had been reduced to perhaps 10% of its pre-outbreak levels. But humanity had proven its resilience and capacity for rebuilding. However, as the sun set over New Phoenix, Webb received a transmission that reminded him that their victory might not be as complete as they had hoped. "Commander Webb, this is Captain Sarah Kim reporting from the Australian Reclamation Zone. We've encountered something unusual during our latest sweep. Infected creatures that appear to be immune to the standard antidote formulation. Request immediate consultation with medical specialists." Webb exchanged concerned glances with Dr. Reed as they absorbed the implications of the report. The infection had shown a terrifying ability to adapt and evolve throughout the crisis, and the possibility that it might be developing resistance to their cure was a sobering reminder that the battle for humanity's survival was far from over. "Dr. Reed, prepare a medical response team," Webb ordered, his voice carrying the weight of renewed responsibility. "It looks like our work isn't finished yet." As night fell over the settlement, Webb stood watch over the community they had fought so hard to build, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges in humanity's ongoing struggle to reclaim their world from the darkness that had nearly consumed it.